Dan Dickow here for Gonzaga Nation SI and the Gonzaga Nation Media Network. Wanted to break down a little bit of what the NCAA Selection Committee looks at this time of year. Obviously, Gonzaga has qualified for the NCAA tournament due to the automatic bid in the WCC Conference Tournament. They would have been in regardless had they win or lose because against St. Mary's in that title game, because each conference runs a conference tournament outside of the Ivy League. Ivy League is the only conference in the country that doesn't run a season-ending conference tournament. The league champion of the Ivy League automatically gets the bid to the NCAA tournament. But every other league runs a tournament, and the winner of that tournament gets the automatic bid to the NCAA tournament. And so that's one of the reasons this championship week creates so much excitement, so much stress, so much attention amongst college basketball fans. You know, you look at a team from our area, Eastern Washington, down in Cheney, they won a share of the Big Sky Conference regular season title. They shared it alongside Montana State. Well, Eastern Washington lost in the first round of the Big Sky tournament on a buzzer beater to Northern Arizona. So their season is done. It's ended. They don't have a chance to advance then for that automatic qualifier, the conference tournament title, such as Montana State, who they shared the conference league title with. Montana State went all the way to the finals of the tournament in the Big Sky tournament. They won it, so they get the automatic bid. What happens now if you're a team such as Eastern Washington, if you're a league champ, but you don't win your tournament, you're in the NIT. So that's how the field for the NCAA tournament is automatically populated. That's how it's begun to be populated for the NIT. But that leaves 29 or so at-large bids for the NCAA Selection Committee to choose. And they have a number of criteria that they use to select. There's 7 or 8 different things to look at, but the key things that the NCAA Tournament Committee looks at is, what's your record? One. What is your net ranking, which is a computer-based model to predict how good you have played against your opponents, as well as your opponent's opponents. So it accumulates what your strength of schedule is, what your opponent's strength of schedule has been throughout the season as well. The net ranking, as I mentioned too, is something that the selection committee really looks at when they look at the seeding for the NCAA tournament, who should be in, and then that offers a little bit of insight as to where those teams will be sent. Typically, if you're fighting for a 1 seed, they're going to put you as close in a pod to your home location as possible. That's why in years past, you've seen Gonzaga play in Seattle. You've seen them play in Salt Lake City or Portland. So typically, if you're a 1 seed, you're going to be at the place that's closest to your home location, which allows more of your fan base to travel. So the NCAA will try to do that in many situations, circumstances, keep teams as close to possible, so that allows people to travel. But there's not an exact science to it. There's not a perfect algorithm to how they do that. Sometimes you get lucky. Sometimes you get shipped into a different time zone of the country. I'll talk a little bit about some of the bracketologists and some of their predictions. The furthermost west pods in the first round and the second round this year are Sacramento and Denver. So I personally would expect to see Gonzaga in one of those 2 pods. But if you look at some of the other teams that are from the West Coast that are really high in the net rankings, UCLA currently top 4 in the net, Arizona about the same net ranking as Gonzaga right now, because Gonzaga sits at 8. I believe Gonzaga's at 6. I believe Arizona sits at 8 or 9. Last I checked last night. But the reason that's important is maybe in the eyes of the selection committee, they feel UCLA or Arizona is more worthy of that location. So lots of different things to be looked at. One thing that always comes up, and people make this comment, what do your eyes tell you? Well, the NCAA selection committee has said on multiple occasions, they don't look at the eye test. They have a certain criteria that they go by, And that's how they slot their teams 1 through however. And then that's how they build the bracket in as they start to put in these automatic qualifiers from conference tournaments as at-large teams that are absolutely set to be in the tournament kind of get solidified as being 1 in, and then 2 a seed range of where they should be, and then 3 location of where they should be. But when you look at it now, the net ranking takes into consideration, like I said, your schedule, your record, your schedule, your opponent's strength of schedule. And what they have done is they've broken out your games into one of 4 quadrants. So you'll hear a lot at this time of year, hey, this team has a quad 1 win. This team has a couple quad 4 losses that have really hurt their resume. Or they've been really good in quad 2 and quad 3 and they haven't dropped any. Well, really what it does is the NCAA tournament, the NCAA has made these 4 quadrants, and I'm going to read those 4 descriptions for you to you really quick. And the quadrants have differentiators based on where the team that you're playing or played is ranked. So it's 21 or 38 or 170, whatever it may be. So that's your net ranking. And then the quad within it is the title of the game, I guess that you could call it, as to be the importance or how good of a win or loss that was, depending on the quad. So with that quad setup, there's 4. It determines what the ranking is, and then within that ranking, it becomes a quad 1, depending on if you're playing at home against that team. A quad 2 would be, a home game, an away game, or a neutral site game. So it has different differentiating factors to be labeled a quad 1 win as opposed to a quad 2, depending on where the game is played. So for it to be a quad 1 win, you have to at home beat a team, that is ranked in the top 30 of the net. So if Gonzaga were to beat St. Mary's, which they did at home, that St. Mary's was a top 10 team at the time. So that is a quad 1 win. Now, the other determining factors for a quad 1 win is if you're on the road, if you win a road game at a net ranked team 1 through 75, or if it's a neutral site game 1 through 50. So Gonzaga having beat St. Mary's in the title game, they were still top 12, top 15 in the net at the time. That becomes another quad 1 victory for Gonzaga. It's a quad 1 game. Quad 2 looks like any home game that you have versus a 31 through 75 ranked team. An away game in a quad 2 is 76 through 135. A neutral site would be 51 through 100. Quad 3, 76 to 160 at home, 135 to 240 away, 101 to 200 neutral site. And quad 4, which Gonzaga has done as good a job as they can to stay away from these games, these opportunities of scheduling in the non-conference. But unfortunately, you're going to get some of these on occasion. Any home game against a team ranked in the net 161 or higher. On the road, 241 or higher, or any neutral site game, 201 or higher. Now, the reason this becomes so interesting and so unique with the neutral site game to categorize what quad the game was in is when you go back and you look at what so many of these teams try to do in their non-conference. And a lot of people say, why isn't there a home and home with this team on campus versus off-campus sites? Well, many times these teams won't agree to play unless they're neutral site games where they maybe neutralize a little bit of that home court advantage, yet they can still play a really good team that maybe they think will help them in the long range in the net. You look at Gonzaga's played in many of these games over the years. St. Mary's has begun to play in some of these games. A lot of non-conference schedules that teams put together, you're trying to look at your opponent and figure out how good is this team going to be? Where will they fall in the net where maybe we can get a quad 1 or a quad 2 win, an opportunity? It becomes really important for your mid-major teams. Now, I'm not talking Gonzaga. St. Mary's really doesn't even fall into that category as far as how this goes because they've been so good the last few years. But you're talking about kind of your Santa Clara level teams. Maybe your second place team in the Missouri Valley or the Ohio Valley Conference. You might only have 1 or 2 quad 1 opportunities in the entire year. You might have only a handful of quad 2 opportunities. So you really have to make the most of that to bolster your resume. So if by chance you make an NCAA tournament, your net ranking is fairly high, or if you are second place in your league, first place in your league, or second place, and you don't win the conference tournament, you still try to bolster yourself and give yourself in every opportunity you can to have a nice resume. Now, where it's become difficult and where it's very interesting is so many of these power conference leagues have gone to an expanded schedule. So they might play 18 or 20 non-league games, sometimes even 22 now. The problem that creates for mid-major schools is less opportunities for really good mid-major schools to have quad 1, quad 2 opportunities. What it really does to help these quad 1 teams in these power conference teams is it gives them the ability to pad those quadrant 1 wins or those opportunities. So, for example, Gonzaga, they'll play as difficult a schedule as they can find. And in quad 1 this year, they're 6-4. In quad 2 games, they're 5-0. St. Mary's, on the other hand, 2-3 in quad 1 games, 7-2 in quad 2 games. So Gonzaga's scheduled as good as they can. So quad 1 wins. You're looking at the Kentucky neutral site game. You're looking at Michigan State neutral site game. You're looking at Alabama neutral site game. Those would be quad 1 opportunities outside of the league. So that's one reason, Gonzaga's schedule is the way that they do in the non-conference. Now, to show you an example for the power conferences and how it is structured or how they try to schedule, you look at the Big 12. And hands down, in my eyes, the Big 12 is the best league in basketball this year. It's probably the best league the last couple of years. You look at the amount of teams that are unbelievably good in that league. Well, how many quad 1 opportunities do you think those teams have? A ton. Take, for example, Kansas, 15-6 in quad 1 games. Texas, 11-8 in quad 1 games. Baylor, 11-9 in quad 1 games. So really, a lot of times what these power conferences doing by adding more conference games, you're giving your teams more opportunities to get wins that are recognized as good by the NCAA selection committee. Now, I don't agree with it. I think, that's a way to kind of tip the scales in your favors with scheduling. And a lot of teams have gotten creative with how they go about scheduling their non-conference because they know they're going to have so many quad 1 opportunities. I've always fallen to the thought process of, let's get more of the mid-majors in. If you're hovering around 500 in your league, even if it is a great league, you've had opportunities to prove your worth throughout the year. I don't think you should be in the NCAA tournament with a negative or with a 500 record in league. But based on how the analytics and the numbers and the net rankings and the quad 1, quad 2 wins, many times it builds up their resume so that the NCAA selection committee, I don't want to say falls for it, but gives those teams the benefit of the doubt over some of these mid-majors, where many times these mid-majors never had an opportunity to play enough quad 1 or even quad 2 games. And even if they did, maybe with limited opportunities, they didn't perform in it. So maybe if you give them more quad 1, quad 2 opportunities, they would make the most of it. And I think it would add even more intrigue to the NCAA tournament. I like that approach, that thought, as opposed to expanding the tournament to 96 teams, which is something that's been talked about. Next thing I wanted to talk about real quick was just the bracketologists and the bracketology websites that you'll see out there. And there's a number of them now. There's 20 reputable bracketologists now that are giving their projections on what they feel is going to happen with the NCAA tournament field. A couple of the most, respected websites that I just quickly wanted to touch at and show where Gonzaga lies at this moment in time. And I'm recording this Thursday afternoon, March 9th, with lots of basketball to be played. ACC tournament, Big East tournament, Pac-12 tournament, Big 12 tournament, ACC, all these different leagues are going on. So there can still be some movement maybe negatively for Gonzaga, maybe positively for Gonzaga. I think for Gonzaga, you really got to look at UCLA and Arizona in the Pac-12. UCLA just lost Jalen Clark to injury throughout the year. Does that mean they might get knocked off early in the Pac-12 tournament and bump them down a line or two? And same with Arizona. With their struggles and their inconsistency over the last couple of weeks of the season, will they be able to make a run to the title game in the Pac-12, or are they going to have an early exit and maybe fall down a little bit on the seed line, allowing Gonzaga to move up? But Joe Lunardi with ESPN has Gonzaga as a 3 seed in the West, where the 1 seed is UCLA, the 2 seed is Texas in his eyes. But he feels that Gonzaga is going to be shipped all the way to Albany, New York. Jerry Palm of CBS Sports, he has Gonzaga as a 2 seed in the South, with Alabama as the 1 seed in the South. And he has Gonzaga playing in the pod in Sacramento. The Sporting News, another great website that has bracket updates and projections, has Gonzaga as a 3 seed. They don't have it broken down by region, but they did have UCLA and Arizona as 1 and 2 respectively as seed lines. So just a few things to kind of keep in mind about how the NCAA tournament selection committee fields the tournament, what they look at as far as in the resume with the strength of schedule, your opponent's strength of schedule, obviously your overall record, but then also your quad 1 and quad 2, quad 3 and quad 4 even results in those games. So really interesting time of year. This could all change. I have Gonzaga slotted as a 3 seed right now. I think by being 6th in the net, by being ranked top 10 in the country, I think 3 is probably the lowest seed that they will get. I do think there's a big opportunity for them to move up to a 2 seed. I doubt that they would be able to move up into a 1 seed, but you know what? I think for Gonzaga this year, that would be awesome to be a 2 seed based with all the projections and the expectations coming into this year, the perceived struggles early in the year and how they've been playing over the last 6-7 weeks or so has been a lot of fun to watch. So for Gonzaga Nation SI, appreciate you listening. We will have lots of updates as we head into Selection Sunday, and then the bracket is revealed, and we'll begin to preview all that Gonzaga has in front of them.